Welcome back to Monday Special, where we're delving into the discussion tonight on child abuse and why we're seeing the numbers go up in Kenya. And of course it's a global issue, but really we're focusing on our country and trying to see how we can keep our children safe and protected. I have panelists with me this evening. I'll start with introducing the lady who is on my right. She's Honorable Teresia Matheka, Chief Magistrate at the Nanyuki Law Courts and also in the Children's Magistrate. So she'll take us a little bit through the law regarding child abuse in Kenya. And then we have Evans Munga. Evans Munga is a social worker and counselor and also a program assistant at Childline Kenya, contacts of which we'll be giving you later on. If you do want to reach out, if you know of a child who is in distress, there are some contacts, so please look out for that a little later on. And then finally we have Susan Gitao. She's a child psychologist and also a lecturer at Africa Nazarene University. She'll tell us a little bit more about her focus at Africa Nazarene University, but thank you all so much for being here. I think before I come to you, Teresia, perhaps I can start with Evans. And is it safe to say that these, just based on the work you do as a social worker, you're seeing more and more cases of child abuse in Kenya?
Yes, yes.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
All right. What are some of the reasons for this?
Well, I think one of the reasons why most of these cases are on the rise is because of awareness. These cases have been brought up, people are aware, now they are coming out reporting. And again, many of these cases happen because they had focused around, you know, reporting, people knowing that now this is wrong, this is right. People are coming out to, you know, throw up these kind of issues.
All right, so the awareness is there.
Yeah, the awareness is there, but there is need that it needs to expand.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
More nationwide.
Yeah.
I'll come to you, Teresia, and before I do, here's a look at some of the numbers that were actually in the dailies today as well. In 2014, 6,101 defilement cases were filed in Kenyan courts, and in 2013, 7,727 defilement cases were recorded, so bringing the total for both years to 13,828. And then according to the National Child Helpline, in 2015, 186 cases have been reported so far. 2014, we saw 511. 2013, 715. So that's just a kind of a look at the numbers. And maybe, Teresia, this is where you're coming. And the first thing I'd like to ask you is, as per the law, what constitutes child abuse?
The Children's Act begins by telling us what it is. And it is anything, any injury that could be physical, psychological, sexual, across the board. That can be child abuse. Okay. Unfortunately, we talk about defilement, but things like early marriage, yes, you know, that's child abuse.
It is a form of abuse.
Neglect of children, that's child abuse. Even sometimes in domestic quarrels, children are used as collateral. You find two parties are fighting about something, and one uses the children as you know, collateral against the other one. That's child abuse, because the children get in the mix in the wrong way. And
from your experience in the courts, which is the one that seems to be most presented before you?
Of course, defilement takes a very big chunk of this, because it's the most visible. Society has this thing about anything sexual, and some other things like beating a child and fighting over a child do not look like so much like abuse, but defilements and sexual abuse and physical really present themselves, because they're really the ones that we see out there. Yes.
And what are the magistrates' day-to-day experiences in handling some of these child abuse matters in court?
I'll speak from my experience and also from the experience of colleagues, because we've had sessions where we talk about these things. Of course, a child, this begins from the society. The child, it happens in the community, then the child is brought either by the family or the chief or a neighbor. They end up in a police station. By the time the child gets to court, that child has gone through not only the abuse they went through, but other things that have happened to him or her by the time they get to court. So when they come to court, they are already going through something really big, that trauma.
And the trauma,
So we receive a child who is supposed to give evidence on what happened to her, and on whose evidence we're supposed to determine the guilt of the person who offended her or him. It's not just girls who get offended, by the way, even boys.
So they're supposed to give evidence, but I'm sure by that time they're so shocked and...
Definitely. And the thing that we see as let me say, children magistrates, and some judges would also deal with those matters, is that this child may end up before you and nobody has prepared her. So they come. The courts are not friendly. I can tell you the criminal justice system is not friendly to children. So she will come or he'll come. They're supposed to take their stand. Probably if it's a children's court, the magistrate will have done something to ensure they are comfortable and be sworn or just go through the process and start giving evidence. So those are things that make it very difficult for the child. And sometimes cases will fail because a child will just keep quiet.
Because that's really sad. We'll come back to that in terms of maybe how best people can prepare a child for that. And maybe this is where, Susan, you come in. First of all, what should you do if you suspect that a child is being abused, neglected? What do you do as an adult, as a neighbor, as a friend, as a sibling? What do you do?
The first thing, you actually raise an alarm, because it's the high time that Kenyans go to know that we all have a duty to protect and a duty to warn. It's important that we have organizations like Childline and maybe ANCAN, Plan International, and they actually write Save the Children, and they actually write on the ground doing their job. The only maybe issue that I can say that is a big challenge to date is the locals, the community at the grassroots level, knowing if I know a child is being abused, where do I go? You find most of them keep quiet. They are reporting to family members who do not want to face the shame of accepting that their children are being abused. But apparently, just like she said, the defilement cases are the ones that reach the court. But there are other forms of abuse, including verbal. You are living in the neighborhood where children are actually being called names, and they end up believing that that is who I am. So in later adulthood, they suffer low self-esteem, they lack confidence, they're not able to unearth their potential.
I'll come to that in terms of how it affects them later on. But what is it that's making society, or I would say making children victims to these predators more and more at such an alarming rate? What is it that's happening in our society that's making this happen? Because it's very troubling. One, and then on the other hand, it's usually people who these children are supposed to be able to trust. But just based on your experience and based on the trends, why do you think it's happening more and more?
Janet, the truth is, from my experience, the children who report sexual or even physical, psychological, emotional abuse, they come from dysfunctional family systems. There is no perfect family, yes, but a functional family system in every day-to-day life, they know what's happening to their children, they listen to them. They may not communicate like we do, but if somebody really cares and they are responsible for their children, they will get to know how the day was for them. For me, it's about the parenting also, which is also a factor of a functional or dysfunctional family system.
So you're saying, is it the lack of parenting makes these children more vulnerable to strangers and predators?
There is one, and also the community that just takes care of itself. Because there are people who've watched children being abused, and they said, after all, it's not my child, it's not my business. So it's about the community or all the socialization agents, because even in a school setting, we have, like the report to UNICEF with the Kenyan government 2010, that 99% of corporal punishment is still taking place in school, or any other form of physical violence in schools. Who is the teacher? We always say a teacher is a second parent, right? But this is the child who comes from a dysfunctional family system, because you realize not very many people understand how children behave and what they are communicating through their behavior. So when they do not understand, you will find a child is caught up maybe with drone, they're not able to do their homework, but that child is actually a victim of abuse from the family system. But the teacher doesn't know. What does the teacher do? If they don't know and they're thinking this is an undisciplined child, they actually work on them again. This child,
so it just adds fuel to the fire.
The
it
child
just makes it worse.
There's that, we see it even in court, that there's that disconnect between the parent and the child. Sometimes the child will be abused at home and no one will notice until the child goes to school and the teacher notices something strange, either the way the child is walking or the way she's talking, and they end up being the ones to report, and the parent is surprised. So those things, what she's saying is really true. There's a certain disconnect between within the families, and it gets worse when it happens in the home. Because the mother may say, and we've seen that, where a mother will be pressuring their daughter, please don't proceed with this matter. Or the community will be saying, no, we can pay compensation or something. So those kind of things, so that disconnect. And children feel left out. That's one of the things that is so clear, that the right of the child to speak out sometimes is left out, because we'll be asking the mother, what happened? What happened?
But her voice isn't heard. His or her voice isn't heard.
And then we expect the child to tell us the way we adults think. The child has their way of communicating.
All right.
Even communicating.
I guess, like I said, I really want us to come to that in terms of preparing a child, but you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I need to add something about parenting and also issues dealing with how people need to report this kind of abuses from the family and going to the community. I think strengthening the family is one of the priorities that we are taking as Childline through our programs in family and also reaching out to the community. That's why we get to know that issues about children are happening, and also empowering children to speak out. Because when you get that, like she said about this dysfunctional families, why is it that this family is not reporting this kind of cases? Also the issue of culture is a big issue. Why is that culture playing a big role in ensuring that this case is not being reported? And we need to pay homage that this kind of things happen because of retrogressive cultural practices. That's a big issue that needs people to speak about it, make noise about it, and ensure that children have a voice. That's why we have 116. We train parents. We have a parenting program. We also train schools, because we understand that most of these cases happen in schools.
All right, we'll come back to, I think what I really want to come back to after the break is A, how to prepare a child to talk, but B, also the safety of that child once they've spoken. I think that's one of the biggest concerns. If you're going back to that same environment, how do we know this child is going to be safe? And if you've noticed on the panel, we don't have a parent or a child who has been affected. We just thought that's really not something ethical that we wanted to do. The panel really is with experts who can give us some more information, as opposed to making the parents or the children feel like victims again. And that's why the panel is as it is. Keep sending your feedback using the hashtag MondaySpecialKE. You might have a question. You can remain anonymous if you want to, or text us on 22422 if you want to leave your name and location. We'll be right back on Monday Special. Welcome back. You're watching Monday Special, where we're talking about child abuse and how we as society can continue to protect our children and perhaps even prepare them when they're going through something like that. And we're going to get to that in just a few moments. I'd like to read some of the feedback. I'll read some of it later as well. But we have Kibet from Nanyuki, who says, Chief Magistrate Maveka, you're doing a great job in Nanyuki Court. So I guess the work there is going on well. And then someone else here is saying, Joyce from Iwaso is saying, some parents don't actually mind that their children are being abused, and that's such a shame, which is something that we've mentioned. And then we have caning is child abuse. If a student in Form 4 in school gets sick and isn't given permission yet and pleads with the principal, and then they're caned. So this for me is something that's really troubling. And so there's just quite a number of SMSs, but we'll go through them in just a few moments. Twitter as well, there's some tweets. Nancy Okuta says, child abuse cases are communally handled, no justice is served, making it to continue rather, and the lawyer of the courts should apply. And then at Eric Kogi says, parents must take their role seriously. They must know what their children are doing at all times and who they are with. So keep sending us your feedback, and we'll try as much as possible to sample what we have. Susan, I think before we come to the telltale signs, maybe one of you can answer, what is the right age or safe age to leave a child at home alone?
Alone with no one?
Yes.
At all.
At all.
It's when you can be sure as a parent, because children develop differently in the developmental stages. When you know your child is safe. And this, I believe children are very unique. If you find your child cannot turn off the gas on their own, if you find that they cannot break items, which I believe no child, in fact, until they are 10 years of age, that you can think, even leaving them alone. You have seen people who go to shopping, then they lock up their children in the vehicle. Surely, that is also child abuse. Because that confinement, what it does to a child, it denies them freedom even of thinking, freedom even of relating, socialization, and parents think they are protecting. Overprotectiveness also is also a child abuse.
Can be a form of abuse.
Yes.
What are the telltale signs that a child has been abused?
You may have the child becoming withdrawn. They may become aggressive. They may actually develop depression. And how would you pick depression in a child? Is a child who even talks about, if they are Christian family, they will talk about going to Jesus. So in the real sense, they are thinking about dying. So they have suicidal ideation. You may find a child who is not able to relate with other children. They are over. And if we are talking about sexual defilement, you'll find a child who is talking the language of adults. But when you look at them and observe very clearly, they cannot relate with sex the way you know it. You may also find them trying to expose other children to pornographic, maybe material, sexual acts.
And that's someone who's been exposed to the same.
This is it. Surprisingly, Janet, you may find even in adulthood, the people who are defiled, the pedophiles. You do a very good investigative inventory about their lives. They were actually, most of them, abused as children. So the other thing you may find about these children is, in school, for example, the child is not able to concentrate. Or when you're extending your hand, that is where you find in the West, because they're so much aware of child abuse, you don't even go touching the way we do here, because a child who has been abused, say for example sexually or physically, they would actually not want you to touch them. You'll find them jerk, you know. You may also find them crying, regressing, like bedwetting. Somebody who stopped bedwetting at age, who should have stopped bedwetting at age 6, they are bedwetting even in high school. What is it? And many other signs like physical bruises. How do you find a child with a bruise and they were actually not playing? You find some of them with sexual violation. The teachers, as you said, they are very good at picking this. The walking style is funny. They may find discharge on their maybe pants. They may find the child basically like the ones who are sodomized. They even have blood oozing out. So there are so many forms of this.
So you just have to be very alert and attentive.
And find out more. Because if you don't find out more, you may also come up with the wrong diagnosis, especially when it comes to mental. When you talk about PTSD, you don't exactly what happened, because even loss of a parent, divorce, separation can present. This is it.
Okay.
In addition to that, we see that also in court. A child is brought, we call it a child in need of care and protection. Maybe a child who's lost, a child who's orphaned, a child who's just truant, and you might be surprised when they get to the police station. The police will bring them as a child in need of care and protection. But if the magistrate have had that experience, you know, like you talk to the child and ask her what happened, you find that actually the reason why the child was in the street, either running away from home, is because she was being abused. But because even within the criminal justice system, we don't have the capacity to find these things. The child may take so long before it's found out that she was actually abused. And of course, as we will find out later, the evidence sometimes is lost. And those are some of the things that we are saying, that disconnect in society that we are not able to see. Maybe we need some kind of
justice is gone.
We'll come to you, Evans, but how then do you prepare a child to report? Because you mentioned earlier that they struggle, some of them are quiet. What's the process of getting them to open up?
Actually, when it comes to the criminal justice system, we have things, there are steps that have been put there in the law, but the capacity is missing. For example, when a child arrives at the police station, it is expected there is a gender desk or a children's desk with an officer who is trained in those particular, in that area.
And we don't really see that.
They are not, the capacity is not there. Then that person will be able to interview the child, and if they are not able to call a children officer, who again is expected to have been trained in this particular area. But I'll tell you that capacity we don't have. By the time they come to court again, so we rely on those particular persons, particularly the children's officer. We will call them and say, please talk to this child. And the court also can send the child back to the community and refer them to a counselor. The law actually allows us to do that. That when the child comes the first time to court, you can actually find out from the police, has this child been prepared? Has she been talked to by a counselor? And we can refer the child to a counselor who can prepare them and report to the court that the child is now ready to testify. But that's also limited because the counselors are
Oh my goodness. It's painted a circle of just lack of capacity, and that's what's kind of crippling the ability for them to be able to.
But then allow me to say this. We have a law, the Victims Protection Act, that provides clearly that a victim of an offense should be provided with this spectrum of services. Psychological, welfare, legal, all those things. They're provided for there, but they're on paper.
It's not enacted.
It's just that, it's enacted. We have a specific law there saying that any victim should be able to get those services.
But they're just not there.
They are not there.
All right. And so, fine, let's say best case scenario, you're able to get a child who's able to testify. How do you then ensure the safety of this child? Because like I said earlier, that's another huge concern in terms of you've spoken out against this perpetrator. So what happens in terms of the safety of children once they've kind of come forward with this case?
That's great, and I like the idea that most of these cases end up failing because of lack of capacity. But let me address your question about how do we ensure that the safety of the child is
taken care of.
Once a child has come forward and said, you know, I've been abused, we ensure that the safety net around that child is secured, looking at the interest of the child. The child can be taken to a temporary shelter as the case proceeds, so that we ensure that the life of the child and the environment around the child is conducive as the case proceeds. That's number one. Number two is to ensure that the safety net around the family, around the community is that favorable, so that when the case ends, the child can be reintegrated back, and ensuring that people are aware that this kind of evil are happening, and they need to come out of that kind of cocoon to ensure that children's rights, issues affecting children are spoken out, so that people are aware. So number one is increasing the safety net in terms of creating awareness. Number two is system strengthening. Most of the cases in the courts, they are thrown to the dustbin because the gaps within giving information, preparing the child was not sufficient.
Was not sufficient, So you don't even see it go through. In fact, in terms of convictions, are we seeing more of those?
Actually, we had, there's in the Evidence Act now, there is a provision where the court is allowed, if you believe the evidence of this child, if you believe that this child is telling the truth, you can actually convict on that evidence. So that sometimes what they used to call corroborative evidence may not be there. So it calls upon the magistrate to be able to really listen carefully, watch the demeanor, you know, all those things that go about. So that is one big plus that has helped a lot of cases to get through. But I want to add something about the safety of the victim. The court has the powers to make certain protective orders, to remove the child from that area, to remove that environment, to make orders, exclusion orders against the perpetrator, that they don't come to that home. And of course, after the child has testified, they can actually also be taken care of. If you allow me, I can give a small example of a child who was she was a victim of early marriage, and the court is supposed to, rather the court is meant should make an order declaring that marriage null and void. We did that in that situation, but the child was in an institution where she was rescued. But then the threat, since the perpetrators were not arrested, the man who had married her and the father of that man, the people who received the dowry, were not found. The child was still under threat because she could easily have been kidnapped because she's still a wife. So that threat created a situation where this child needed to be removed from that area. So we have the Witness Protection Agency again, which actually came in our situation and took care of the child.
So there is a Witness Protection Agency?
Yes, in this country.
And it runs well, but does it have the capacity?
But they are trying, because like in this particular case, the request was made and the child was rescued. We had a case of a child who was defiled by the father. You know, because of her age, because the sentences are really serious. If the child is below 11, it's a life sentence. If it's between 12 and 15, it's 20 years. So this man has gone to prison for 20 years. This is the last born in the family, and of course the rest of the children will be saying it's because of you that our father is in prison. And as a court, you can make orders for the removal of this child from that environment, and that's what we did actually, and ask someone to come and take her, at least for the time being, until the family is able to process that, because he actually did whatever he did, was found guilty of the offense, but the safety of this girl, you could tell that you know, she was in danger.
Yeah,
whether physical,
was under threat, for sure.
So those processes are available. It's just that maybe we have not picked them up because of the capacity I'm talking about.
Well, okay, so we definitely need to. That's an advocacy issue right there, to push for the capacity. As long as that's not there, then we're going to have more of these cases.
We are having trainings, actually, serious trainings for judicial officers and people across the justice system to build this capacity so that we can be able to work together and ensure the safety of these victims along the way.
So we, in line with what they are doing, we have what we call system strengthening, ensuring that the system around the child is made aware that these things are there. People are trained, and issues of reporting cases. People are trained on how to report, and also ensuring that the gaps, especially in development cases, a case can be reported, but then people don't know some of the technicalities around the evidence. Suppose a child has been defiled. What are some of the procedures you take to ensure that the child is safe? Number one, the case is secured, and you have the strong case against the perpetrator.
Who is this abuser, Susan? The profile of this perpetrator, what do they usually look like? Who are they?
By the way, some of them are innocent looking, especially the pedophiles. They love the company of children. So, and that's why I'm saying, if parents or caregivers are informed that there's this particular adult older than the child, that means they have authority and power over the child. They always like to be with the children, and especially in secluded places or in private places. They shower them with gifts. You know what happens? The child gets attracted to this person. And when they are abused, what they develop, sorry to use this term, is called psychogenic amnesia. Because I care about my father, if it's incest, I care about my friend or my family friend, because we have family friends who have actually abused their friends' children. They feel like if I report, I will not have the relationship I've been having. Because they, at a particular age, they are not able to tell whether this is a functional relationship or not. And to add on to that, I would like people to know that children verbalize things differently from us. In fact, at African Nazarene University, we are the first university to have a concentration in child and adolescent counseling, because the children go through crisis, and when they try to verbalize this or act out, the parents and the caregivers can't pick it.
I know we have to wind up, so very quickly, how then do you look out for those signs? What is it that they're acting, or what is it that they're doing that should make someone say, this child is trying to communicate to me? Can you cite a few examples?
Exactly what I had said earlier, the signs and symptoms.
Okay, fine, so you don't
have to go back. But it's important for example, the caregivers to tell children. You remember when we were in lower primary or even nursery, we were taught how to sing head, shoulder, knees and toes. Why don't you tell a child, if you really want to protect them, to sing about and even know where their private parts are, and even say, nobody should touch me here and there, and if they do, I can scream, I can talk out, I can report. Because if we all know this, then we will listen to our children. We will observe our children's behavior. And I'm very happy with organizations like Childline, Save the Children, and the Ministry of Education, basic education that takes care of early childhood, primary and secondary. They're actually developing a handbook for teachers. And we're actually waiting for you guys to give it back up. Because if the legal system does not come in and also own up that you don't have the capacity, you should have counselors in the legal system. Counselors trained, not just assuming the child officer can be able to pick what's wrong with the child.
All right, I think now is a good time to bring up the contacts as we get the final word. I don't know if they're ready yet. Okay, all right, okay, I understand they've been scrolling, but we don't have a board for them. Okay. All right, so they've been running on the lower part of your screens. I don't know if we'll keep looking out for them, because it's very important that we take note of those numbers in terms of reaching out. If you feel like there's someone, a child who's been abused, then there's some numbers out there. We'll try and look out for them on the bottom page, but we've completely run out of time. Maybe very quickly, your final remarks or your closing remarks in terms of how we can actually, okay, I understand they're running now. Childline Kenya contacts, the toll-free is 116. The office ones are there. I really hope that you've been able to take note of those, and of course, childlinekenya.co.ke. So please take note of those 116 is the number that should stick in your mind. That is the toll-free line where, you know, children, I suppose, are the ones who can, and children and adults and can remain anonymous, because a lot of adults want to remain anonymous if they're reporting that kind of thing. So maybe just your final remarks in terms of how Kenyans can come on board in this fight against child abuse. Maybe we can start with you.
Thank you. I think it is important for us to understand the child. As we heard from Susan, the children communicate in their own way. We shouldn't expect them to communicate to us the way we communicate. They will tell us things, we'll ignore them. So it's important for us to understand that the child is really different from the we should not treat them as small adults. And secondly, the justice system is available. It's just that people have these fears about things happening, but within the judiciary, I can tell you now every magistrate is gazetted to handle children matters. And the judiciary is working really hard to ensure that every magistrate is given capacity. A curriculum is being developed at the JTI, that's the Judiciary Training Institute, to ensure that we are trained, and also reaching out, working together with the other, we call them juvenile justice agencies, the police, the probation department, children department, and prisons.
So the problem is that Kenyans don't have faith in these systems, but you're saying that you're working on them.
We are actually working on them and even training together. Right now we have a class where you find a police officer, a magistrate, a probation officer, a children officer, and a prison officer sitting in the same class, so that we all learn what everyone is supposed to do to deal with children.
So the take home from you is there are, wherever you are, there's a court there, take advantage of it to report these cases.
The systems are working.
The systems are working.
Even without the capacity, everybody is trying very hard, because we know this is a very serious problem.
All right. Thank you so much, Sirisia.
Thank you so much. I think one thing I will wish to say is that people should wake up and call and report these kind of cases. They can call 116. If children cannot call, then call on their behalf. Children don't have a voice, and we have to speak on their behalf. That's number one. Number two, I call upon the child protection actors across the board, and I challenge the government to support this system, because the government is the primary duty bearer, and in our end we need their support. We need their support so that we can reach out to many children who are unable to call 116 and also get support. That's number one. Number two is to ensure that systems around the child, judiciary, police, the education, the TAs and the like, are trained so that they are able to handle cases of children with the decency that it deserves.
Which is saying it's a work in progress.
So for me, I would like to tell parents that and the caregivers, you are the first person to protect your child. You're also the first person to warn and even report in case of any abuse. The other socialization agents like the school, the community, with the Nyumba Kumi initiative, if it was taken seriously, you would have people reporting these cases. Let neighbors know. Mtoto wangu ni wetu, right? And when you talk about the peers, their children be empowered, that they can even report that so-and-so was abused by so-and-so, even if it's the school environment or home or within the community. When we also talk about the faith-based organizations, let us not close an eye to this, because you may find even for example, I am a Christian, you find cases of abuse being reported. Children go to preach at the church ministers, but because it's an African setting, thank God for the Parenting in Africa organization. They are actually doing a lot, and what they want to do is to tell Africa, yes, we are developing, but we can never be like the West. We need to take care of our children. Gone are the days when we talked about the child being belonging to the village. Now the child belongs to no one. And let people know, when you actually abuse a child, the effects are long-lasting. And you can imagine if a child commits suicide because you molested them. And let people know, even at home environment, it's not difficult to be a counselor for your own children. They draw things, they sing songs. Let's listen to our children. Let's observe our children, because their innocence needs to be protected. In fact, the counselors also need to know this, and other professionals. They have a duty to be advocates for children, because children have no powers. We adults have powers. We professionals have powers. And when I go to the legal system and the parliamentarians, let them not joke when it comes to issues of children, because you'll find even Children's Act 2010, there is somewhere they say that the caregiver, the parent, has still the right to discipline, but that discipline is not well defined. So somebody abuses a child in
so those are policies that need to be reviewed to some extent.
And let's not joke when it comes to children and those who have survived childhood abuse. they know the pain and they know the long-lasting effects. Why would you want a child to live that way? So I want to say everybody needs to be responsible.
All right. Thank you all so much. You know, thank you for telling us that the systems at least are working. We'll wait to hear from Kenyans and, of course, urge Kenyans to take advantage of those systems. The numbers, of course, that people will use and the information that you've equipped us with. I understand we have some tweets. Let's see if we can bring those up, whether it's questions or just feedback on Twitter. Let's start with this one. At Mariam Dika says, parents need to have a rapport with their children, trust them and believe in them, which is exactly what we've just mentioned. And then this one says, I think teachers should help parents on dealing with issues of child abuse. We've also touched on that. Retrogressive cultural practices aiding child abuse. Children must have a voice. Silence breeds injustice. Absolutely. And then at Cynthia_Oprah says, parents should watch out for withdrawal and change of behavior in their children. It's usually a telltale sign. And the Department of Children should start a campaign for awareness of child abuse across the country. Okay, that's the feedback. People are saying the toll-free number isn't working.
Well, it's working, and that's the challenge. It's true. The capacity there is not sufficient. So maybe there is the traffic with the landline, and we need support across the port so that we ensure that we reach out to
so people just keep trying 116.
Yes, yes.
Okay, because they're telling my director that they're not getting through.
Yeah, there is a lot of calls. Yeah, and that's why
there's not enough people to field those calls.
Exactly, and we need technical, support so that we reach out to the masses.
I think the take home is that the systems, the will is there, but the capacity isn't.
Yes.
And that's just completely heartbreaking because that's keeping children more vulnerable.
And we cannot run away from that challenge. That we have.
Yes, advocacy. It's about just raising our voices and making sure that happens. Okay, we're completely out of time. Thank you all once again for your information. And of course, if you've been watching, please, 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 we all have a responsibility to protect our children. Take advantage of the information that's out there, the numbers, the websites, the justice system, and just try and play your role as well in policing and making sure that the children are safe. I'm Janet Bugwandishu. Thank you for watching Monday Special, and we'll see you again soon.